All right. I hope everyone is well today. I wanted to make a video talking about the meaning crisis. And this is something that has really come into the fold, the intellectual YouTube fold, in terms of working through what the meaning crisis is and what are some ways to cope and deal with it and what are some possible solutions out of it. And I wanted to just give kind of my 2 cents a little bit. So I was thinking through this. So this might be a 2-part video series. I might even do a live stream on this, and I'd love to hear from you guys what you think about this topic and this material, and what your experience has been with regards to the meaning crisis. Is there one from your perspective? How has it manifested in your life? And I'm going to go through kind of that, and from my perspective here, just kind of riffing a bit. So I did make some notes, and I just jotted down, why a crisis? From whence does the meaning crisis originate? And I'm going to talk through some of the talking points or some of the bullet points that I jotted down. So first one I had here is the Enlightenment and scientific materialism. Right. So really, we're talking about the last 300-400 years where we've had this hyper focus on this way of asking questions about the world through the scientific method, which is one of the most profound innovations that human beings have generated that we can think of, and the way that we ask questions of the world and try to find out its objective nature is through the scientific method, where you pose a hypothesis, and then you experiment, and then you, based on the data from the experiment, you either validate or invalidate thy hypothesis. And the more you do this in more areas, in not just science from a scientific perspective, but from a technological perspective, a natural perspective, from a psychological perspective, social perspective, and across the board, we've applied this rubric as kind of the method of knowing self, other, and world. And that has had a lot of promise because it has helped the world come out of poverty. A lot of sicknesses were ameliorated. A lot of positive things have, to say the least, have come from this, scientific worldview. But I think we have to include that, obviously, that this, in the Enlightenment thinking is one of the root causes of the meaning crisis. I think from the scientific perspective, it comes from the nature of the questions that we're asking. Necessarily provide insufficient answers when thinking through metaphysical or questions of the meaning of life, the meaning of an individual's life, the meaning of life in general, the trajectory of the world in history. How does this method of asking questions? It's insufficient. So I would put that in one of the major root causes of this meaning crisis. In another topic that I documented here is the death of God, right? Everybody's heard the Nietzschean idea of the death of God, where when he wrote that, he was insinuating, or he was claiming that, God didn't die on his own. We killed him. The blood is on our hands. Now, the death of God has profound implications because it's not the death of God per se. It's the disintegration of the fundamental coherent worldview that human beings have been living under for the entirety of their existence, at least for the last few thousand years. And this manifested differently in different parts of the world, right? You had obviously the Christian West, but you also have, the Hindu religion, you have Taoism, Buddhism, Aboriginal religions and whatnot. So they all kind of lived in their own coherent worldviews where they could assign meaning to their life and their family and the work that they do through the tradition that they were raised in, right? So the death of God is really this integration of this coherent worldview, driven by globalization and the intermingling of cultures um, that have kind of dismantled and multiplied the traditional worldview. So we are moved away from a unity towards multiplicity, and I think that's reflective, again, obviously, in the idea of postmodernism, which you can see here behind me. A lot of the books that you can see are from the postmodern philosophical tradition, so to speak. And actually, the bookcase behind me is a good reflection of how I've been working through the meaning crisis. Just how it manifests in my life. You can see on my right, you have a lot of philosophy books. On the top there, you have the work of Gilles Deleuze, a lot of his, almost every book that he had written, a lot of secondary material, and then a lot of Heidegger as well. So I spent probably from the year 2012, 2013, really just studying the work of Deleuze and Heidegger and a lot of the postmodern philosophers and psychoanalysts. And you see that reflected in those books there. And you see under the next shelf, you have, Jacques Lacan, you have Jacques Derrida, you have Freud, Hegel. And in the middle there, the trilogy, Foams, Globes, and Bubbles is kind of the magnum opus from German kind of conservative postmodern philosopher Peter Sloterdijk, who I would highly recommend checking him out. And then behind my big head there, you have some Badiou and some Zizek. The book that I would recommend in terms of understanding the meaning crisis from Slavoj Zizek is his book, The Sublime Object of Ideology. I think it's a profound book, and it situates the kind of the structures of postmodernism and the meaning crisis quite nicely, even though it doesn't couch it in those terms. So again, this postmodern way of thinking and working through things is another root cause of the meaning crisis, right? And these aren't in any order. I have integral thinking, right? So the work of Ken Wilber, who really generated or at least popularized the idea of integral theory, which is the idea that so all of the religions and cultures and human beings cannot be wrong 100% of the time, right? So there's partial truth in every religion or social structure. And the idea is to look back at history and the development of different cultures. They use this spiral dynamics, where it's a brilliant way of categorizing the history of cultural evolution, essentially. And the idea is to transcend each level, whether it's, traditional worldview, the postmodern worldview, which is, the scientific worldview, then the postmodern worldview. And then there's another second tier, right, that transcends all of the worldviews and includes them. And that includes all of the religions. So this is a really popular, and whether people know the theory or not, they are working with these ideas, the ideas of being able to take from each religion, whether it's meditation or yoga or Tai Chi or energy work or meditation and from crystals to the New Age religion. So this is really something that I experienced when I had a sort of awakening of sorts, and I really got into these New Age ideas, and I was really immersed in them, and I didn't see them as kind of New Age ideas. I just thought that, hey, I woke up and it's time to wake other people up. And I bought a bunch of crystals and I studied, my avenue was really a traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism, and the practices that I would do, and still sometimes do, would be Qigong, breath work, lucid dreaming, journaling, psychedelics, things of that nature, right? Which again, all of this has a disintegrating, even though it feels when you're in the situation that you are obtaining insights that is adding to the construction of a new identity, a new earth, to quote Eckhart Tolle and those types of spiritual folks. Really, there's no ground there, at least from my experience, and it can lead to very a very disintegrative force within someone's relationships, with work, with family, with friends, and with the culture in general. I had a couple years there where during Christmas, I wouldn't want any, Christmas decorations and everything. I saw that as kind of childish and, superstitious. And, it was really a strange time for my family. From the outside, it looked like, I had a mental breakdown, which I kind of did. And this is one of the personal, trajectories that I wanted to bring in here. I had a kind of a splintering of my mind, but while I was inside of it, it felt, and I had some very strange and profound spiritual experiences, that are kind of hard to even talk about and think through. But when you delve into the spiritual realm, right, that when you start working with these psychotechnologies, as John Vervaeke likes to call it, you are opening yourself up to forces that you do not understand, and you can't really coherently work through unless you have the guidance of someone that's truly, authentically, genuinely looking to help and has, worked through a tradition for their lifetime. And even then, it's probably a rare case, or let's say a kid from California in his 20s and in 2010 is going to get some significant life affirming qualities, that are going to be lasting from the YouTube gurus, so to speak, that you see online. A lot of people, and I was working with these people in a sense, trying to develop my psychic intuition. I, called myself an empath, an intuitive empath, and I think there is something to that. But that idea has been taking, and a lot of people are making a lot of money on the backs of young people trying to work through the meaning crisis, trying to figure out what their life is, going to be about. So other things that manifested in my life as, reading tarot cards, really getting into understanding what tarot was, and reading books on spiritualism, oneness, the work of, multiple types of, Ram Dass was someone that I still appreciate, but I really got into his book, Be Here Now, and a lot of his lectures that are on YouTube. He had a pretty profound impact on me. And I'm not saying that from my perspective that these qualities and these experiences that I went through kind of were necessary for me to be where I'm at now. And hopefully where I'm working towards, helping myself and others work through these ideas. And I find it's the interrelationship and the working with other human beings and kind of bearing your soul about what you went through and experiencing and listening genuinely to others as they do the same. That's part of the process of kind of working through and hopefully overcoming this meaning crisis. So yeah, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. I have here, so global flows of capital, culture, and technology, this idea of hypermodernism. There's this philosopher, John David Ebert, and Brian Francis Culkin, and Michael Aaron Kamens, who wrote the foreword to the book Hypermodernity, Hypermodernity and the End of the World, which is a good little small book. Let me see if I can get it real quick. So it's a short book, and it came out maybe last year, but it talks about this, postmodernism, this hypermodernism, where the logic of capital being distributed and filtered through the globe, along with cultures moving, causing, again, the disintegration of institutions, not just religious, but social, and cultural and economic. And we're seeing just a movement towards hyper multiplicity. which in a sense is both destructive and provides the potential for hyper unity. I don't know if that's the right word, but for the ability to harness the potential energy that is being dislodged from kind of traditional worldviews. And again, this goes back to the idea of integral theory. And I'm not sure uh, what this will look like, and if it's anything to that will come to fruition of harnessing the spiritual and the energy of all these different cultures and religions and trying to unify them under one rubric. Again, this seems like it would be something that would be like have a salvic effect, a type of global unity and salvation. But if you read the scriptures and you read the church fathers, which is something that has impacted me greatly, you can see that this was predicted, and the idea, and I don't want to bring this in, the Antichrist, right, is not the it's not some big monster. Well, kind of it is. That is like a main monster. It's Christianity without Christ, right? So it's this idea that all the religions are equal, ecumenism, and that the idea is to file them under one rubric and have kind of a global religion. In a sense, that is both necessary if you want to look at the trajectory of using technology to integrate and connect the world. But we're seeing what the effects of that have had. I mean, in our culture here in the United States and across the globe, it's had the opposite effect. It's had a disintegrating effect. It's had an erosive effect on institutions and trust in politics and all types of institutions. The WHO, the CDC, the FBI, the CIA, the World Trade Organization. All of these kind of structures that have held together our global worldview are disintegrating right before our eyes. So that I would put that as another kind of root cause of the meaning crisis. I wrote down social media technologies. There's an excellent new Netflix, if you still have Netflix, documentary sort called The Social Dilemma, where it really, I think it's an important documentary to watch right now, as it gives a lot of answers to how these social technologies have been utilized to extract data and resources and value from human beings without providing anything in return, right? Facebook is free, Google is free, right? If it's free, then you're the product, so to speak. Let's see if I can remember this quote that was in there. It said there's only two disciplines that look at their consumers as users, right? And that is the software, social media conglomerates, and drug dealers, right? So users. The idea is that we are being addicted to these technologies that have kind of overcoded and territorialized our lives, our kids' lives, and it's really, that is a manifestation, I think, and an accelerant of the meaning crisis. I really, really would recommend that, watching that. If you don't have Netflix, I understand. I don't know why I still have it. I don't watch it, but I'm glad I had it for this, I guess, because it's hard to find elsewhere. Let's see what else. I wrote down here, revolutionary thinking, right? This idea, which I was very drawn to as a young man going through college. This idea that, the Marxist idea that the history is a progression of different economic forces that eventually will supersede capitalism into a socialist and then communist utopia, so to speak, right? And the ideas on paper sound just very logical. It's like, why wouldn't you distribute resources to those that need it from those that are able to, right? Why wouldn't we want to make sure that our neighbors' children are taken care of as best as we can, right? The idea from Christ is love your neighbor as yourself. So why wouldn't you want to have a distribute resources equitably and with all of the valid criticisms of capitalism that Marx leveraged? I mean, they're brilliant and accurate, I'd say. his system has been another corrosive, disintegrating, dismantling force through this idea of revolutionary thinking. Like the idea of a revolution is, it's the word revolve, right? So it's coming back to the beginning in a sense. And I don't see any positive way forward through these ideas outside of some kind of major, life affirming addendum or addition that could be generated. I just don't see that happening. I'm more of a pessimist with the history that you've seen in the 20th century of these types of forces trying to take hold, whether as the Soviet Union, or a lot of the Baltic, just the South America, a lot of different areas that have experimented with communism have had brutal results. And the refrain from that is, well, that's not real communism, that they just didn't do it right. And now with technology, we're going to be able to realize this, utopian socialist, world that I think is a dangerous idea now, more than ever. So let me see what else I wrote down here. So globalization, again, we talked about that, the forces, the cultural and economic forces that are just intermingling, especially in the United States, and what that has led to, right? So there is no coherent rubric or identity or system to identify with that will unite people. And I think this is the key problem with communism, right? Communism presupposes a community. A community does not come together on a negation of a system, right? It just doesn't work like that. There has to be a life affirming, a positive, authentic, generative force that unites people. And that we just don't have that with these types of systems, like the idea of the proletariat to overcome the bourgeois, and which we've seen in the revolutions in the 1800s, the French Revolution, how brutal and violent that was. And the idea that that is not the case anymore with these ideas, especially what you see have taken hold in the United States with the critical race theory. I've studied critical theory intensely, but this critical race theory is something wholly different and wholly other. And the way that it has mesmerized very smart people, very, the intellectual people, is a very fascinating and scary thing to watch. I think a lot of it has to do with, a lot of people have talked about this and are more, eloquent at doing so than me about the 60s and the Maoist revolution that you had in China, which has roots here in the United States. And you've probably seen Yuri Bezmenov. He's been all over YouTube lately. I highly recommend watching him, but be careful, because he can get you in a state of nihilism or a state of despair, which isn't going to help the meaning crisis. He talks about how there's been this concerted effort to overcome, the American identity and destroy the structures of the country, which has been a 30, 40-year plan that has it has kind of four modes. So the first is demoralization, second is destabilization, third is crisis, and fourth is normalization. Normalization is when the kind of the Soviet, the socialist, power structure takes over and overcodes all of the cultural functions in the country, and that's being referenced, right? We're seeing the dismantling of a lot of our institutions. They're taking valid critiques, let's say, of the of police forces and the use of police force, valid critiques, and they're twisting them into something destructive and decoherent, and it's dangerous. And there needs to be real conversations about what's happening with our institutions, with the police, with the communities that they serve. And we can't have that if we have this kind of mind virus of critique without affirmation, critique without any kind of solution. If that continues, it's just going to be continued disintegration. And I don't know how long this thing will hold if we continue down this path. Here we're talking in September, 2 months before an election that, from my perspective, either way that it goes, right, whether it's Biden or Trump, there's going to be another shock to the system, and not just in the United States and globally. And we've had the shock of, and again, in terms of the meaning crisis, right, which has accelerated in the last few months because of the coronavirus, That's been a shock to our system, right? And then we had the George Floyd situation, the murder of George Floyd, and then the resulting just massive, expansive, energetic release from people, from young men and women that were locked up, that were, fed this idea of constant critique, and the constant idea that America is inherently bad and racist. And there are a lot of these types of issues, but they can't be discussed right now. There's no level playing ground for people to actually have discussions. And again, that's very dangerous. But I won't continue to kind of hark on that. And I just wrote down the word corruption, right? And this is a big one, right? And this is what the postmodernists and they latch onto very valid critiques of the corruption and throughout the church and through religion, the corruption through institutions, corruption through the socius, the breakdown of the family, toxic masculinity, the patriarchy. These are actual ideas and topics and concepts that can be discussed, and there can be progress made, and there can be understanding of what's going on here. But there's been some kind of, again, this mind virus that's overcoated this section of intellectual inquiry, where if you have a certain worldview, if you have a certain point of view that is not approved, you will be labeled a racist or a white supremacist or a sexist, of misogynist, all this stuff, where these words lose their meaning when you apply them to everyone and everything that thinks differently than you. So it's a strange occurrence that's happened here. And some other stuff I wrote, the logic of capital, which we talked about here. I wrote, what is work, right? What is work? Are we looking to re-establish an industrial society? We're past it. We're past post-industrial societies. And now we're with the idea that we're going to bring back manufacturing to the United States, or we're going to remove the manufacturing base from China, install it in Vietnam or wherever it may be. That just reappropriates and continues this logic of capital, which has this disintegrating effect. That will lead to what Zizek calls a global apartheid, right? Where you're going to have what you're seeing in states like California, where you have very, very wealthy, like in Silicon Valley, but then you have homeless people encamped right outside. So there's no in between. And that is a force that's accelerating. You're seeing it in so many cities, and you're seeing an exodus of people leaving these cities because of these realities that, again, we can't discuss because they've been politicized like everything else. And that the term politicized is something that I don't know exactly what and how it means now. I mean, there's always been politicization of ideas in politics, and something has happened, and it's been accelerated and manipulated to be a really destructive force. And again, I would highly recommend The Social Dilemma, because I think it talks about some of the first principle root causes of what's happening with the fabric of our society based on these social media technologies. Which again, the logic of capital runs right through them, right? We are being mined for our attention, to modify our behaviors, for us to purchase things that are subliminally offered to us, and through Facebook scrolling, right? Did you know that every fourth when you're scrolling through Facebook, every fourth instance is an ad, and it's very subtle. You don't even notice it. So a lot of these forces that were done purposely, I don't think they were done purposely to destroy our culture and our society, but they were done purposely through the logic of capital. And this is, again, where we have good critiques, but we got to understand, I don't think that capitalism per se, everybody says that's capitalism for you. Late stage capitalism is highly problematic, but the idea that we're going to move to another system, whether it's capitalism or socialism, techno-socialism, without dealing with the root cause of the corruption in capitalism, is the same thing that's the root cause of corruption throughout the history of the world, right? That has been obviously critiqued extensively. And my opinion, it is the human heart, right? It is sin, right? Sin is to miss the mark. To miss the mark is our incentive structures are jacked, right? The reason that we're told that we live here, on the planet Earth, and what we're to do with our lives is to find a job and acquire wealth and get a 401k and then retire. And then, so it just, that doesn't hold purchase anymore, because that's not available to a large swath of people, where it used to be the middle class, where we could work under this kind of rubric of, middle class economics. But that has failed, and it is failing, because I think at the very root structure, we have not addressed the issue. And, some other things I wrote down, I'm going to end this here in a bit here. What is work? What is identity? All right. What is an identity? How are identities formed, and why are they important? They are important because they are what operate, they will operate a world, right? To operate within a world, there has to be a coherent structure. And at the top of that coherent structure is what provides the identity, right? It's the idea of unity and multiplicity coherently working together to engender a worldview that provides well-being for self and other, right? So we have had these self-enclosed worldview that developed and worked through the population to help them progress from whatever their metrics are, but that has been kind of that has been destroyed. And that goes along with the next question I asked: what is ideology? Right, that is the one of the major things that are leading to it's interesting to talk about in terms in reference to the meaning crisis, but I think that'll open up a can of worms here. What is nihilism? What is the culture war? What is toxic masculinity? These are some of the other questions that I was asking here. But all right, just to finish up here, what I'm going to be discussing maybe in this second part, and I'd love to get some feedback from you guys if you're listening this far. Please like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. Share the video, but I'd love to get some feedback on your thoughts. The next video, we've discussed here first the roots and some ideas of what where the meaning crisis is kind of originates from, and some of the qualities that have brought it to light, especially in the last year or so. Next, I want to talk about how different worldviews are wrestling with the meaning crisis. From a scientific perspective, I jotted down, you have scientific materialism, Dawkins et al., what's his name? Sam Harris, and a lot of those guys, right? And Sam Harris is in a little bit of a different bucket now. They have the physicalists like John Vervaeke, Eric and Brett Weinstein. You have panpsychism, which I include in the rubric of science, but that's kind of bleeding into other territories here, right? Neo-nihilism. How does the New Age, religious syncretism, this idea of integral theory, how is that rubric dealing with the meaning crisis? Atheism, which I think is waning now, right? Which is becoming morphed into this new religion of critical race theory, which I really don't want to get into, but you're seeing these religious structures being repeated in this very non-religious, atheist, nihilistic way, which is one of the most dangerous things that I think are happening right now. And then what I really want to get into is Christianity, and how I think that Christianity, the ideas and the philosophy of Christ and his teachings, I believe, provide a sort of source code of how to live with right relationship with self, other, and God, right? I believe that the Decalogue is the 10 Commandments. It was sent from above, and it is a code. It is a coherent way that if you implement these ways of being into your life, you will have well-being for you, your family, and your community. They're very hard to implement, obviously, and institutionalize, right? So it has to be, done on the individual level. But the idea of loving God with all your heart, right? The fundamental, the being that presupposes your being, right? The fundamental pattern of existence and of the world that is responsible for your life and the blooming of a flower, and for the sunset and oceans and the seas. And for the heart and the love that you have for your kids, right? The originator of that, you have to have some faith in this part, right? But this is an important part. You have to love God with all your heart, right? The first commandment is to not have any other gods, right? And above me. Oh, it seems that, what is that, a jealous God? I've talked about this before. No, it means that you want to worship the highest of the high, and that will or that will situate your identity in the hierarchy appropriately, right? Hierarchies are not inherently bad. Hierarchies become corrupt. Corruption is bad, right? But hierarchies in themselves are the way that just the world lays itself out. And we're not going to get into that there, but the idea of love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Think of your neighbor as the other from a postmodern perspective. Love the other as yourself. So that has a little bit of a nuance in it, because it's love the neighbor as God loves you, right? So you really have to grok and work with that. And I don't know how this would be done on a level to scale, right? But we'll get into this in the next part, right? The ideas that spring forth from the Decalogue, from the 10 Commandments, right? Don't covet your neighbor's stuff. Don't be jealous of your neighbor. Wish well for your neighbors and for their success. If you are jealous of their things, even if it's not overt, it will have a disintegrating effect on your personality, on your relationships with yourself and with your family, right? If you are married and you are sleeping around with other women, or with against your wife, that will have a disintegrating effect with your relationships with your children, with yourself, and obviously with your spouse, right? But there's also idea, if you think or lust for another woman, if you engage in pornography, which it seems silly to say that pornography is a bad thing, or it should be censored, or is there anything negative about it? It has an incredibly corrosive effect on the fabric of society, in a sense. And I can't believe I'm saying this now from my perspective, not a few years ago, but it's this idea. It has a corrosive effect on the human heart, right? Coveting your neighbor's goods, sleeping with another man's wife, stealing, murdering, obviously. These have corrosive effects, but there's a lot of subtlety to these codes to live by that are profound, and I just can't articulate them as good, but they're worth looking into. And I would suggest, the church fathers and reading the Bible and without the preconceived notions that you have of it from your history, personal, whatever it is. Even if you're been in part of the church, I've been part of the Orthodox Church when I was younger. I'm not anymore. I'm working with potentially getting back into the church there. So I'm talking from a perspective of apostate, right? But I've implemented, a prayer rule in my life. I pray 3 times a day. I do that with my kids, with my wife. I read the scriptures and I wrestle with them, and I work with, the demons, the desires, the difficulties, the challenges in my personality that, again, I say are rooted in sin, right? And sin means to miss the mark. If you miss the mark for an extended period of time, you are internalizing this way of living incorrectly, incoherently. So when you try to comport yourself to live appropriately, you have a whole set of passions, they call it in the Orthodox church or Orthodox religion, the passions that are manifesting themselves through your desires, and they could manifest in your behavior. It could be addiction to drugs. It could be addiction to pornography. It could be an addiction to buying stuff and filling your house with new things and new cars. It could be an addiction of desiring women. It could be an addiction of whatever it is, right? These forces all attack us. They attack the human heart from an Orthodox perspective. These are actual demons, right? These are abstract beings. Think of it like a thought that attack the weaknesses within a person's constitution. And those weaknesses come from sin. They come from living a life missing the mark, of not living rightly. If drinking a lot when you're a younger kid, sleeping around when you're a teenager and in college, which is encouraged, right? Think about how much the massive consumption of alcohol is encouraged in our college kids. It's insane, right? So I would say that internalizes this idea and this structure of living wrongly. But you can fix that, right? And we'll talk about this next video, right? What are some ways to get out or work through the meaning crisis? And I'm going to, look through, the rubric of science, through the New Age kind of rubric, atheism. And then I really want to get into what is Eastern Christianity? What are these ideas and how can you incorporate them in your life? And the beautiful thing is you can try it. You have to, if you try it wholeheartedly, um, you will see miracles happen in your life if you do it. Just give yourself a chance and try it. And if it doesn't work, leave it alone. All right. You have to try it and go all in. And I'm not saying everybody, this is the rubric for everybody, but I would say that, you know, getting involved in a tradition that's meaningful to you and deeply exploring and embodying it is a way out of the meaning crisis, right? It doesn't have to be, you know, I was born and raised, my family's been Greek Orthodox forever, right? So I left that. I'm using this tradition, you know, I'm diving into this tradition, and I feel that it's something profound and meaningful for me. So for me, it has given me tools and a framework and a richness, and especially reading the church fathers, it has given me a way to float in this sea of chaos. And I am trying with these videos to send some lifelines out and just get maybe some other people to consider. There are ideas that are deeply rooted in our history, in the Western culture, right? It's fun. You can critique the West. We've done enough, right? We need to rescue the, we need to access the, and this is what I think we find in the church fathers, we need to access the stem cells, right? The stem cells of our culture, and we need to reinvigorate it. That's what I think, you know, the monks at Mount Athos, all they do is pray, right? This is kind of an idea of these pluripotent cells that we can access again, right? Spiritual bread. And we can kind of reconstitute ourselves. And that is a way out of the meaning crisis, at least from my perspective. But anyways, I feel like I've rambled a lot here. I'll maybe make another video. Depends on, you know, what you guys think about this one. I love you all. I hope you all are well, and we'll talk with you soon. God bless.